right, why don't we go ahead and get started? It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the talk on lowering costs and increasing ROI. My name is Greg. I'm a product manager at Databricks, and I work on what we call the money team. If you couldn't guess from the name, we handle things related to money. So that's all the billing mechanics and the internals, and that's also cost management things that allow you to understand where you're spending money. So it's 4 o'clock on Thursday. It's been a long week. There's been a lot of excitement. So we're going to try to have some fun here together to help us, get through this next hour without falling asleep. I hope you're all well caffeinated and ready to go. So let's start off with a pop quiz. Actually, we're going to start with legal stuff and then a pop quiz. Which way do you want to see the cost chart go? Up or down? Let's see hands for A. Who wants to see their cost chart go up? 2, 1, oh, one hand lowered. Okay, 1. Who wants to see their costs go down? Ooh, a lot more hands, all the other hands. So I think that's sort of true. You do want to see the cost of the data project go down over time as we invent new technology, as things get more efficient, as you optimize that workload. But then this morning at the keynote, they announced that new thing that's really going to help you unlock that other project that right now is pretty manual. And then, oh yeah, there's that LLM you wanted to launch, and that's going to start, and that might get more efficient. And over time, you're going to have more and more data projects. And so while the cost of one project might go down, your overall cost for data projects will probably go up over time, and that's a good thing. And what I like to talk about is that it's fine if costs go up as long as the value you are getting from those projects goes up even higher. And that's really where we're aligned. Often people say, hey, Greg, you're working on the team that's trying to get people to lower their spend on Databricks. Don't all the salespeople hate you? And I think most of our salespeople are smart enough to know that if you help your customers succeed and get good value from the products, over time, those customers will be happy and growing customers. So today we're going to talk about some of this in the context of ROI. Now, before we dive too far in, we're going to try something fun. So I'm going to show off a bunch of cool new features that we are launching here. And I get to be on stage and talk about them, but I've done very little of the work to make these features real. We actually have an awesome team of engineers, and it just so happens that they're having a monthly celebration at the same time as this talk. So we decided to try something fun, and we are going to attempt to have them wave and say hi. So let's see. There is some engineers gathering in our office in Bellevue. There are some customers. If folks want to wave, you can meet each other digitally. It looks like folks are still coming into the cake celebration. I see more cakes than people right now, so I suspect there's still a few people showing up in a minute. But anyways, wanted you to have a chance to see some of the behind the scenes, and they will be watching as well as we go through some fun stuff today. So let's hop back into the presentation. And how many of you have heard the statement before, data is the new oil? Not as many as I thought. This gets said a lot. It's been said. I don't believe that's true. There's another phrase that goes around that I think is more true. Data is not really oil. Oil you can do a lot with immediately on its own. If you have a few drops of oil, you can do something. If you have 2 pieces of data, 2 datum, there's not much you can do. Insight, that's oil. That's something you can use a single insight by itself. Data's more like sand. You need a lot of it to do something, and you need to do something with it. And if you know much about sand, not everyone likes sand, especially not this guy. If you get this meme, you're my people. This is Darth Vader. This is Anakin Skywalker. He hated sand so much he became the evilest Sith Lord in the universe. When you take sand, a raw thing, when you take data that you have a lot of and you process it, you can get something valuable. Whether that's the GPUs that Jensen and the team at NVIDIA produce, whether that's something beautiful, whether that's something useful that propels cars forward, old school cars, not the electric ones like the Rivian team, who's a Databricks customer, showed off last year at a Data AI Summit. We're going to talk some about value, and I think what's important to understand is it takes a lot of work to get to that value. And ultimately, the ROI, our return on investment, we can think of as the value we get divided over the cost. I think you all know that equation. So let's talk about costs. Obviously, with that equation, if you get costs to go down, that ROI equation goes up. So how are we going to help you get your costs down? Well, the first thing we like to do is help you understand where you're spending money. And we have a vision for how you can do that. And it starts with system tables, which gives you access to information about your usage of Databricks. And we'll talk more about that in a second. From there, you can take that data wherever you want. We're pretty agnostic on where you take that data. We know that we are not your only vendor, we're not your only data vendor, and you need to think about your costs. And so you can take that information into a cost management app. You can use it in a data tool that you have to visualize things. You can even take that into your cloud provider and monitor it where you're looking at the rest of your cloud spend. But we know some of you spend a lot of time in Databricks, so we also want to make it very easy to use Databricks tools to understand those costs. And we've been talking more and more about how we can make that easy by building native cost management tools within Databricks. And that's what we're calling the Databricks Cost Center. So today we're going to take a look at a few of these and the things we've built over the last year to help make it easier. Let's start with system tables. So here's a diagram of the system tables we have live today. I'm going to pause here for a second so you can memorize it, and then we'll have a pop quiz. So we launched system tables into public preview a year ago on this stage at Data and AI Summit, and a few customers started using it that evening, and since then there's been a lot more customers querying and using system tables. The exact number on the y-axis isn't important here, but what you can see is there's more and more tables coming out, and they are all growing pretty quickly. We're very excited to see that system tables have been a reliable way to access data about your usage of Databricks. How many of you had a chance to play around with system tables or within your organization? Awesome, that's great to see. So we've been in public preview for the last year, and one of the things we were hoping would be true about customers using system tables is that they would see the same chart I showed a minute ago and be able to do this. They would be able to use the data from the system tables to lower their costs on the projects that they had and then be able to expand into new things. And we've been happy to say that a number of the customers we've been working with have seen that success. They had budgets that they were allowed to spend on Databricks. And as they optimized that spend, they were able to use that extra budget on something else to play around with a new LLM or Gen AI thing. And so I think it's really important what we're doing over here, because all of those cool features you saw on stage in the keynote today, they're not going to be something you can utilize in production until you get your costs under control, until you understand that value. And so that's what we're trying to help you with here. So we're excited to announce that system tables will be going to GA next quarter. We will be rolling them out. Really, this is just a vote of confidence. The tables are going to remain how they are. The schemas are going to be similar. We're going to just make sure that they have SLAs around them, that there's something you can trust, that there's a commitment behind those APIs. And so for those of you that haven't been using them, that have just dabbled, this is our vote of confidence that that is the best way to get your cost information, that you can move away from however else you might have been doing that, whether it's scraping logs or querying the API periodically, and rely on system tables as a source of that information. With that, we need to solve a few more things. Retention and where you store that data is one of them. And so that's something we are working on and should have an announcement around shortly. And another is integration with other tools. We want to make sure that is working very well, and we have some more coming up on that in a little bit. So let's talk about the Databricks Cost Center. This is native tools within Databricks to help you understand your spend. When we launched system tables, it was awesome to give a bunch of data to customers and let them play around with it, but we felt a little bad, like we were giving you homework, like here's the data, have fun and see what you can learn. And it's a little bit do it yourself. Now the cool thing about that is lots of folks did lots of things, including a lot of data engineers within Databricks and our data science and field engineering teams. And from that, we were able to learn what we needed to add to those schemas. We've been expanding them, and we're able to see what we could release. And so now as we build things in the cost center, it's with all of that learning behind us that we can say, great, we've learned sort of the best you can do here, and we have that available. What our goal as a cost center team has been this year is to make you happy. To take those CUJs, critical user journeys, that you spend the most time on and make them super easy. So we've been spending a lot of time talking with customers about what are they trying to solve for, how many steps does it take today, how can we make it a lot quicker. And so with that in mind, as I show off some of the things that we have today, we hope it will make it much simpler. And as we talk about those critical user journeys, we think of the world of cost management in these general buckets. That most of the time, when I hear a customer describe a thing they're trying to do, it can be grouped as one of these categories of a task. They're either trying to understand and report on information, or they're optimizing something to save money. They might be more future-facing forecasting, or they're trying to put controls in place. And then, of course, at the early stages, there's a lot of access and organization things that come up to be able to see the data. We're going to deep dive into a few of these now. First of all, reporting. So there's a paradigm I've seen in the industry, and this isn't just with data tools, it's really with all products, that often there's some fancy charts within the application where you can see some things, and then there's the do-it-yourself method where you get a raw data export and you can use tools to build something. And the challenge I have seen time over time again with customers is that they'll use the UI at first, and then they'll run into the limits of what they can do and slice and dice and drill down. And so then they go and say, great, I'll just recreate this using the other data. And then it turns out they're embarking on a journey that takes a long time. And then even once they get to the insight they want, they realize it doesn't match that UI, and now they're confused. And so one of the things we've been talking about as a team is how can we prevent this from happening, leveraging the fact that we are a data and AI company and we have these tools internally. And we've come up with something that I hope helps solve this problem. So our plan for cost is to power it all with system tables and Databricks tools like our AI BI dashboards. And what that allows you is to have a beautiful UI that a finance person who's not very tech savvy can use right out of the box. But someone that is tech savvy, maybe that finance person, maybe a data engineer they work with, can customize those dashboards because you own and maintain them. And if you want to go a step further, those dashboards give you the SQL and queries under the covers, so you can just run them somewhere else as well or identify the records that they were pulling in. Now you're able to match from the beautiful side to the do-it-yourself side, following the queries the whole way. So let me show you what this looks like in our new AI BI cost dashboards. We're going to hop over to a demo, and we are going to hope that my demo goes better than some of the ones in the last few days, though we have an amazing team that rolls with the punches here. So here is a AI BI dashboard using the new Databricks product you probably heard about at the keynote yesterday, loaded up with all of the system table data for my organization. Now I have this running in a workspace, and this particular one I have hooked up to serverless compute, so it will refresh itself fairly quickly by just running that up and running it down, and it's not going to have a bunch of idle time in the background. I currently have a few configs, and these are classic BI things. I've set it to 12 months as my date range. I am looking at all the workspaces in the account. I've got it grouped by month, but I could choose to switch to a week view instead, or daily if I want to look a little more granular and see what's going on, and I bet that refresh will take me another minute. And then I've got everything grouped by what we call billing origin product, which gives you a high-level category to understand SQL, jobs, etc. You can also look to view by other things such as the SKU or the workspaces. So there's my daily view that's rendered, and we can see similar patterns, but a little bit more granularity there. So this billing origin product is a new thing we've introduced recently. Some of you have chosen to organize your teams by workspaces, and so you can also group that way. I might hop back up to month just to make that a little more legible with workspace. And we'll be able to see which teams are spending money so we can drill in and take action. One of the next things that this dashboard allows you to do very well is to understand how teams are spending money, even if you haven't organized them by workspace, as I have here, and it looks like very obvious which workspace is spending the most money. One of the best ways to see, oops, I've got an error here. Let's refresh and see if it goes away. One of the ways to understand your cost and categorize it is using tags. And so we recommend tags as a way to categorize usage information. You have key value pairs that you can set up as custom. Okay, that's our table view below. There we go. By default, this dashboard looks for the tag budget, the key, and various values that you've populated on that key. But you can actually switch to any other custom tag you've set up in your environment, whether it's project, cost center, etc. You can also use sort of the advanced mode to look by multiple. So what this is going to show us is how much of our spend is covered by a certain tag. And so this is a quick view to see our overall coverage. You can see here, this organization I'm using only has 6.2% of usage covered by the key tag. So we don't have great governance. We might need to look into our tagging policy to get more people tagging things so we can see the cost. If we do ignore the things that aren't tagged with that key, we can drill down and start to see which of those values have spend behind them and when that happens. We can see actually these two different budgets have a lot of spend, one over a long period, one over a shorter period. And down below, we can see some additional details. So one is a mosaic thing that's spending a lot of money in a short period, and the other is a runtime org. And here we can see the totals for those two and actually see that this runtime has spent more money over the past 12 months that I've set my filter to than the other. So this is how you can understand and slice and dice by tags, and it's a great way to get a view of the usage that way. The final thing we've done, which is a bit of future-proofing, is we've allowed you to group by and see the top spending items of many of the different categories we have metadata on. So for example, here I'm looking at my top jobs by job ID. So you can see the gray space is everything that isn't a job because it's null in the job ID. You can see that what I have here is a bunch categorized in the other, and then the top I have right now 10 pulled up. If I instead want to look at my top 20 jobs, I can adjust that variable. And what you'll see with jobs in this environment is it tends to be a long tail thing where we're going to have more covered in this other, but if we hide that, we'll be able to drill a little more and see those top jobs, and now we have it to 20. You can also look by others, such as the run as user, an endpoint name, etc. If we want to understand our usage of LLMs, we can look at endpoint names and see which models have been serving things and look at our top 20 of those. And in this case, we should see our spend from, let's see, we are on top 10 and others. And it's not by name, though. That's showing an ID. So it might still be on endpoint ID, though it does say name. Well, and so as we drill in, we can see where the trends are going. In this case, okay, my hover has the names, but not my key on the right. Here we have our code complete optimized model, which we can see has been trending up in the recent past. So this is our AI/BI dashboard, and we will return to it in a minute to see something else, but let me keep going in our slide presentation for now. All right, another pop quiz to make sure everyone's still awake. A, B, or C, we have 3 different products and the total cost of DBUs. Which one of these is more expensive? Let's see hands for A. A is the most expensive. 2, 3, 4 hands. B is the most expensive. 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. C is the most expensive. Oh, only one. A lot of people didn't vote here. I'm not seeing all the hands. No one's sure. So this is looking at the DBU spend, and I think some of you have figured out that DBU spend is not sufficient to understand the cost of a workload, that the infrastructure under it that is happening on the VMs and being billed to you by your cloud provider can be a significant and variable part of that spend, and that often your total cost for that data work can go down even as your Databricks bill is going up for that particular thing. Now, we know this to be true. Some of you know this to be true, but it's harder to internalize it sometimes than it should be. And so one of the things we've been investing in as a team to make it easier is giving you a way that you can see all of those costs. The first step of it is we are now pulling in AWS EC2 costs so you can see the VM costs. That will pull them in via a token you create in their cost, get their Cost Explorer data, and then surface it in a system table so you can run a single query to basically see that total cost. So we're starting with AWS EC2. We'll look at other clouds and other services in the future to help you understand that total cost. Over the last week, I've heard a lot of people asking, well, when are you going to do it for storage in my tables so I can understand that? I think that's a great question, and that's the sort of thing we'd like to be able to solve in the future. So that is in private preview now, that info cost system table. So I'd like to switch gears and talk about a customer. We always enjoy talking about customers and having them on stage. One customer of Databricks is a company called Capital One. Now, many of you know Capital One as a bank or a credit card issuer. You might remember the commercials. I loved these ones with Samuel L. Jackson. Anytime Jedi Master Mace Windu says something, I listen. So Capital One also has a software arm, and it's a pretty cool story. The way I understand it, there were a team of data engineers building products so that they could understand their spend internally on Snowflake, the vendor they were using for various BI applications. And eventually they realized that the products they had built were pretty valuable and other companies can use them. So they released this as a software to the market, and now they have customers that are purchasing that software. So rather than the bank arm, it's the software arm. Well, over time, Capital One has begun using Databricks as well. And the logical question came up of, well, hey, we want to understand Databricks and Snowflake costs. We were very interested to talk with the Slingshot team about this because, as you'll remember, having any cost management app be able to show you your costs is a key part of our strategy. And so I'm excited to announce that Slingshot will be offering support for Databricks costs side by side with Snowflake costs so you can understand how you're spending on the two products. So it will show you the side-by-side comparison, and it'll also give you some of their other features, such as understanding your warehouses and the scaling of them, using the tools that they've spent years building. So we're really excited about this feature. One of the reasons I really like it is I'm a competitive person. And what I think is going to happen is if you have a view like this, where you see Snowflake costs and Databricks costs side by side, you're going to start asking some questions about performance and cost. Now, I know there is some stuff that Databricks is better at, and I know there's some stuff we're not better at. And I think the more we put a magnifying glass on that, our performance teams and our awesome engineers are going to be able to build things to make sure our stuff is better. So I'd love to hear from folks that are looking at views like this, whether it's in Slingshot or whether you've done it on your own, where we're performing well, where we're not, so we can make sure we're continuing to offer an awesome product. So Slingshot's view of both products will be coming in the coming months. If that's something you're interested in, take a picture of the slide. There's a QR code that will take you to their website where you can learn more information. And some of the team is also hanging out in the room. If you're interested, I can point you towards them afterwards to have a conversation. Let's now talk about Databricks features. I said any Databricks feature could be used to understand your costs. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is now. So how many of you heard about AI BI with Genie, the magical LLM-powered tool that can ask questions. One of the cool things about that is it does really well with structured data that it understands. And one type of structured data that we know a lot about at Databricks is our own structured data that we give to you in system tables. So I've been working with the Genie team to make sure Genie can answer cost questions. When you're in that usage dashboard I showed you earlier, right up here at the top is a button that says Launch Genie. So I've got that clicked and queued up here, and I have my AI/BI usage dashboard to ask some cost questions. So let's see how it does. We're going to ask, how much have I spent on SQL in the past 6 months? And we are going to let Genie work its magic, and we're going to hope it's pretty fast because we're doing this live. So what it is going to do is all of the magical things it does in the back end. It's going to look at the queries in that dashboard. It's going to look at the structured data, have the context. It's going to try a couple times. And then what we should get is a response, generated SQL code, and then we can visualize that. So here we go. We have total spend on SQL in the past 6 months. But you know what? Let's see. Let's break it down by month. Show me, whoops, the spend by month on SQL for the past 6 months. All right, so we're going to rephrase our question and see if rather than a total, we can get a nice month-over-month spend on DB SQL. While it's thinking, I'll show you the generated code. What we have here is pretty good SQL. So we're selecting, we've got our start and end time. We're using billing list prices to multiply the price, and then we're joining that. And so our currency code is USD. We're joining that to the usage table, and it's not bad, Genie. All right, now here is our last 6 months. So there we have December 2023 and the months, and again, we can check our code to see how Genie's doing. So there's Genie answering your cost questions for you. Push the limits of it. Let me know how it does. We're hoping that this will be a great way to answer some of those questions along with using the AI/BI dashboards. All right, let's talk about cost control. So we talked about reporting, how you understand. Let's talk about how you make sure you don't go over budget. Now, there's always a fine balance that we spend a lot of time talking about in Databricks when it comes to cost control. You could implement very rigorous control by just shutting off Databricks. You won't spend any money, but you won't get any value either. You can implement rigid controls where when you hit a certain spend threshold, things shut off. But then you're going to end up with a bunch of very expensive data engineers sitting around at their laptops unable to do anything until the next month starts. And we talk about, well, what is the right way to control spend? And we're trying to take a fairly cautious approach where what we don't do is stop innovation and data work, because as a company, we're on the side of the data worker. We believe that there's sort of a path that progresses from visibility and attribution through to alerting the right people and eventually taking actions. And what I want to talk to you today is how we're enabling that. We've already talked a lot about visibility and attribution. So as you tag things, you'll be able to understand who's spending money and what it's on. For alerts as the next step, there are things you can do now. You could set up a cron job or go do DB SQL alerts, but that's a lot of homework and it involves some technical know-how. We're excited to announce that we have a new budget feature rolling out now that'll allow you a simple interface to set up budgets and get alerted when that team goes over a spend threshold. Let's take a look. So here we are in the account console of Databricks. I've clicked on the usage tab, and what you normally would have seen was some of our previous charts, and now we have our budgets feature in preview. I've set up a few budgets. I'm going to go ahead and refresh because some of them All right, so we can see I have a couple of different budgets here. I have some I have no data on yet, nothing's been spent. I have some where I'm under budget. I can see my 2024 commitment. I'm still under budget, though my spend has been going up over time. And I have some other projects where I've reached the budget and an alert has been spent. It looks like project B went way over their budget. So these budgets can be set up using a simple dollar amount in US dollars. It can be scoped to the entire account or to workspaces, so you can have one or multiple workspaces. And then you can also filter by one or multiple keys. And so if you, say, have different workspaces for your projects in different environments, you can set up a filter that way. You can put the email you want to be alerted when it hits that spend. So one of the practices we recommend is using budgets as a way to draw people into the app, and then using the dashboard as a way to answer the question, what happened, where did I spend money in? I mentioned you can set up that AI/BI dashboard for your account and filter by workspace. You can also set one up for workspaces and then share it with workspace owners. One of the really cool things about those dashboards is you can embed credentials. So if you have someone that doesn't have access to the underlying billing data, but you create a workspace dashboard for them and share it with them, they can view the data using your credentials. And so that's a great way between setting up an alert, having them come in, be able to see what's going on. You can recruit the rest of your company to be able to help understand costs. I talk to a lot of customers where there's a single person that feels the burden of the whole cost for their organization on their shoulders. Hopefully, the combination of these emails going out from our systems and dashboards will help lift some of that burden from your shoulders. So that's our new budgets feature. And the last thing I'd like to spend some time talking about is organizing data. Now, we've talked a bit around this today, and I want to talk about three distinct things. One is I want you to understand the mapping between the cloud provider you work with and your workspaces and accounts. This is something that trips up a lot of people that are new to Databricks, and so I find it helpful to show this slide so you can understand as you set up the different types of organizations, accounts, tenants, subscriptions on the cloud providers, how that maps to your workspaces and accounts within Databricks. Workspaces are one great way to divide teams. Workspaces tend to be a fairly separate way, and most of our system tables have distinct workspace IDs. And so if you have a different team in a different workspace and they're spinning up clusters, you'll be able to easily view the cost by that. Now, what's interesting is I talk to organizations that use workspaces in all different ways. I know some very big companies that have one workspace. And I know some medium-sized companies that have hundreds of workspaces. And I've found it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Sometimes it has more to do with data access, legality, company organization, than it does with tech stack decisions. The other really good way to organize costs with that in mind is tagging. And I've talked a lot about tags. Now, there's a couple things with tags. One is they propagate through Databricks. We also propagate them to the infrastructure on the cloud providers. And so I mentioned earlier that we have the private preview where we're pulling in AWS VM costs. Well, the reason we're able to do that and associate it with the DBUs is we were already passing that info. You can actually do that on your own today. We've just heard from a lot of people it's annoying, and why don't you automate it for us? And that's why we invested in that private preview. But those tags that you have in Databricks will propagate all the way to the VM. With a few exceptions, pools are one area that gets a little bit tricky, but with jobs and all-purpose clusters, that works. So as you organize your costs, you can do things like chargeback and showback. And I know a lot of companies have these requirements. That's why we've built the cost dashboard and the budget feature to be selectable on both of these tags and workspaces, so that as you organize your projects, you can look at your cost centers in that way. There's one other thing we've been doing to help make it easier for you to be able to think about your costs and organize them. And that's a new feature that's coming soon that allows you to share your tag data with your Databricks account team. Now I have here a fun picture of Caitlin and Michael that they grabbed with the John Deere farmer downstairs, or the tractor downstairs at this conference. They're a friendly account team. You have your account manager and a technical specialist, and you probably talk with them on a weekly basis. But often, there's a gap between talking with them and them being able to see and understand the data. So we've been working with the field team, and we have a feature rolling out soon that will let you share your billing tag data with that team so they can, in their internal reporting tools, understand your cost by those same tags so you can speak the same language. What I've seen is in a lot of cases, you're talking about projects and workloads already. You're talking about, hey, we're deploying this new thing for that project or to power that application. But then what's actually happening there is invisible to them. They get a usage dashboard internally where they can see usage go, up or however it's going. But they don't know what's actually happening with that specific workload. This will solve that. This will let you be able to tag the things on that workload, and then they can actually filter on their view. And now you can have a productive conversation that's data-driven between you without having to send CSVs back and forth or do screen shares. So we're excited about this. We hope it makes their lives easier. They work really hard trying to make sure you understand Databricks and are getting value out of it. And so anything we can do to make their and your lives easier is something we want to spend time on. All right, we have a few minutes left, and I want to switch gears to talking about value. We talked about ROI being the value you get divided by the cost you've spent. And obviously, when you lower the cost, you're going to have a higher ROI. The other way you can get higher ROI is by driving up the value and having more value. Tracking ROI for data projects is a difficult problem. How many of you have solved it at your organization and have the ROI numbers for every project? Not a hand. We don't think we're going to be able to solve this immediately, but one of the things we want to do at Databricks is to help you get closer to it. So I want to talk about the framework we think about for value and some of what we're trying to do to make this easier for you to see it. And I'd love to continue this conversation over the coming months and years. As you work on things, loop me in, work with your account team. I talk to multiple customers every week and would love to talk with you and your team about value. So I mentioned earlier there's a number of different ways you can get value from sand. Similarly, there's a number of different ways you can get value from your data. I tend to see value fall in one of these three categories. The first is lowering the cost of something, and that can come in a couple different ways. Sometimes there's a critical task, a data pipeline that's getting things ready that already exists, and by investing in it, by moving it over to Databricks, by upgrading the technology, you're lowering the cost of that, and that adds some value to the organization because it was already spending that money. Another way might be saving employee time, whether they were doing that or whether it's saving time in another area, such as implementing an LLM chatbot that can answer half of the customer service questions so you don't have to have that person spend as much time. So lowering costs is one. Insight is another area that I found very hard to put dollar values on, but tends to be what comes out of a lot of these data projects. I talked to a customer about a year ago who was in charge of making billion-dollar infrastructure, or their company made billion-dollar infrastructure decisions, and they needed a lot of data to make those decisions well. And clearly, the right data can affect a very expensive decision, but it's hard to always judge how much of that came from the data versus, knowledge, other context. We know it adds value, though, and so it's a category that's important to look into. And then finally, there's data products, when you're actually monetizing your data. I found that this one tends to be the easiest to quantify of these three areas because there's a revenue created with it, and so, you can quantify that piece of it. But often it can get tricky as well if the product involves, it's a data product, but it also has value added coming from other places. So this is how we tend to think about value, and over time we want to pull these sort of metrics into Databricks more to help you understand for data projects how the cost ties to the value. Because ultimately, if your value is going up on the projects and it's going up faster than the costs are going up, you're going to be happy, your management is going to be happy, you're going to be able to continue to productionize these workloads and invest in new ones and use technology. And I think that's how we all grow together, and have a brighter data-powered future in front of us. So thanks for joining me today for this. I hope you learned a few things. I will hang out if there's any questions afterwards. Thank you so much.